Welcome to Thunderdome, a place where two men enter, one man leaves. An arena of blood and violence where two people must fight to the death. Released in 1985, the third installment in the Mad Max series sees a now greatly decayed Max, played once again by Mel Gibson, where he arrives at Bartertown and makes a deal with the town's ruthless leader, Auntie Entity, played by Tina Turner, where in order for her to have full control of Bartertown, Max must take on the terrifying Master Blaster in Thunderdome, of which results in Max getting banished from the town, where he goes on to find a tribe of children who believe that Max's arrival was prophesized and that he will lead them into salvation. In order to leave these children into becoming humanity's last hope, Max must return to Bartertown. Growing up, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome was kind of the odd one out, the black sheep of the series, the one that people said wasn't very good. But is this a Mad Max movie that doesn't live up to the glory of its predecessors, or has it been judged too harshly? Well, today we are going to find out as we look into 10 things that you didn't know about Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Let's check it out. Number 10, Lord of the Flies of the Future. When you think about it, Mad Max 2 ends pretty conclusively. As far as story arcs go, Max's journey was complete, as the first two movies make a perfect two-part story. The original Mad Max is about Max slowly losing his humanity, whereas The Road Warrior is the reverse, with Max regaining his humanity. And originally the story was to end there, as Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome didn't even start off as a Mad Max movie. It was originally its own thing. Director George Miller was working on a Lord of the Flies type of story about a tribe of children in a post-apocalyptic future, where an adult stranger enters their domain, in which he helps them to progress to new destinations. It was during the early production that Miller came up with the idea of what if the stranger who helps this tribe of children was Max? And so the story became the third Mad Max movie. And with Warner Brothers fully backing the project, who came on the scene to help with the distribution of Mad Max 2, Beyond Thunderdome's production had started. It's also worth pointing out that there have been several claims that Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome borrows heavily from the science fiction novel Ridley Walker by Russell Hoban, in terms of plot, themes, and questions posed. The fact that Beyond Thunderdome didn't start off as a Mad Max movie probably explains why, unlike the first two movies, it's not really a car chase movie, but more of a philosophical movie about prophecies and salvation. Number 9, Tragedy Strikes. Beyond Thunderdome was kind of doomed from the get-go, as very early on in the movie's production, a terrible tragedy struck, which kind of paved the way to the movie we got. Byron Kennedy was a friend and collaborator of George Miller's. He had produced the first two Mad Max movies and is even considered as the co-creator of Mad Max, and naturally he was on board to produce the third Mad Max film. However, in 1983, while scouting for locations, Kennedy was tragically killed in a helicopter crash, and the incident greatly affected the production, especially director George Miller. And that was a huge problem for Beyond Thunderdome. It lost one of the two components that make a Mad Max movie, as they were a joint effort between George Miller and Byron Kennedy. Number 8, George Miller lost interest. After the sudden and tragic passing of Byron Kennedy, George Miller kind of fell out of love with the project. He claims that he was even reluctant to go ahead with the movie, but decided to soldier on with Beyond Thunderdome as a way of getting through the shock and grief of what happened. However, Miller's involvement in Beyond Thunderdome was limited this time round, with him just directing the action sequences. So co-directing duties were handed to George Ogilvy, whom Miller had previously worked with on the Australian miniseries The Dismissal. Filming took place in locations such as Coober Pedy, which is north of Adelaide, as well as the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, and Homebush Bay, located west of Sydney. To keep the press away from the production, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome went under the working title of Desert World, and unlike the previous two movies, it was backed up by US financing. George Miller would go on to say that he doesn't really remember much of his experience on working on Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, as he was grieving at the time. So Beyond Thunderdome is literally the product of a filmmaker coming to terms with a tragic loss. Number 7. A change in music. Something else that stands out like a sore thumb with Beyond Thunderdome and separates it from the first two movies, to me, is the change of music composer. The first two Mad Max movies were composed by Australian composer Brian May, and his scores had a distinct sound, which helped to create the sound of the Mad Max universe. May was unavailable for Beyond Thunderdome, so French composer Maurice Jarre took over to score the film. And I like his music, and he does a good job, but it's just alienating hearing different music in the series, adding to Beyond Thunderdome's feeling of being the odd one out. Interestingly enough, the movie's trailer featured Mad Max music that Brian May composed for the previous two movies, and that actually helped it to make it feel more like a traditional Mad Max movie, and literally feel more in tune with the previous two films. However, it can't be understated just how good Jarre's music is for Thunderdome. It sounds desolate and has an end-of-the-world feel. Some of his music even has metallic sounds, which goes with the apocalyptic visuals. He also creates a bombastic, jazzy saxophone sound for the Bartertown scenes, which sounds different to anything heard in the previous films, but okay, I'll go along with it. Jarre is an accomplished composer who scored many epic movies before Thunderdome, like Lawrence of Arabia, Dr. Zhivago, and The Man Who Would Be King. So yeah, I'm a Jarre fan, but I feel like the change of music makes it sound different to the other Mad Max movies, which separates it from those two previous films. And that's not a reflection on Jarre. They could have gotten John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith, and I still would have felt the same. Number 6. Tina Turner's hair-raising commitment. Auntie Entity is the movie's main antagonist. She's not downright evil per se, but she has her drive and goals and is determined to achieve them no matter what. But the character still maintains a sense of honour and likability. George Miller said that when the character was written, it was done so with Tina Turner in mind, but they felt that it was very unlikely that she would accept the part. And supposedly at one stage, Jane Fonda was actually considered for the role. But to the production's delight, Tina Turner was interested in the part, and thus she was cast. The role of Auntie Entity took a lot of dedication though. In order to wear her Auntie Entity wig, Turner had to shave her head, which apparently she had no problem with. This explains why the character has a really high hairline. Meh, shaved head, full head of hair, either way Tina Turner is one sexy lady. In addition to that, the dress that she wears in the movie is made out of steel and weighed 121 pounds. The inclusion of Tina Turner led to something that's never happened in the Mad Max series before or since, that being the inclusion of two pop songs, those being We Don't Need Another Hero, which has become an iconic song in its own right, and is probably one of the most remembered aspects of Thunderdome as well as a highlight. The other song was One of the Living, which actually played at the start of the movie, replacing opening music composed by the movie's composer Maurice Jarre. Yep, everyone remembers the song We Don't Need Another Hero, and it's become a classic. Now, I would play some of the song, but we don't need another copyright infringement. Number 5. Mystery of the Pilot. One of the most mysterious aspects of Beyond Thunderdome is the character Jgcertified the pilot, on the account that he was played by Bruce Spencer, who previously starred as the Gyro Captain in Mad Max 2. This is something that has caused great confusion and debate over the years with Mad Max fans as to whether or not Jgcertified and the Gyro Captain are the same person. Not only are they both played by the same actor, but both characters are crooks who rob people and both use aircrafts, making them highwaymen of the sky. Jgcertified has more nobility about him than the Gyro Captain, and a son. But that could be the result of him joining the community at the end of Mad Max 2. After all, we know that he was romantically interested in one of the women in that tribe. So what's not to say that he didn't have a kid? But if that's the case, then why doesn't Max and Jgcertified recognize each other? Well, Bruce Spencer himself finally gave an answer behind this mystery. He said that they had trouble casting the part of Jgcertified, so having already worked with him, the production turned to Spencer and offered him the role, and he was cast at the last minute well into the movie's shoot. So this would suggest that Jgcertified is an original character and not the Gyro Captain. But it gets more confusing as Spencer claims that Jgcertified is kind of a reflection of the Gyro Captain. Personally, I always saw the character as being like a spiritual reflection of what the Gyro Captain could have become after Mad Max 2. So the answer is, he is and isn't the Gyro Captain. He's a representation and continuation of the character without actually being the character. Yeah, confused yet? Ironically, you could say the same about Max in the original trilogy and Max in Fury Road. And both Mad Max 2 and Beyond Thunderdome end with Bruce Spencer's characters playing a huge part in helping to save small communities seen in those movies, so there definitely is parallels between the two characters. Number 4, deleted nightmare scene. There was actually a deleted scene where Max has a nightmare about his wife and son, where he wakes up crying, realizing that he has become just like the evil gang that was responsible for their deaths. Now, considering Max is a character that never shows any emotion, this sounds like it was going to be a pivotal scene, a revelation moment of realization, which probably would have demonstrated lots of growth in Max, but it was ultimately cut from the film. The scene was, however, added to the novelization of Beyond Thunderdome, but the actual scene itself is considered to be lost, which is a shame as I would love to see it. As far as Max's timeline goes, Beyond Thunderdome takes place 15 years after the events of Mad Max 2, of which that film took place 5 years after the events of the first movie, with the original trilogy being a story set within a 20-year time frame. Despite Mel Gibson just being 29 at the time of filming, Max in Beyond Thunderdome would have been aged somewhere in his 40s. Number 3, Mad Max of the PG-13 age. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome was the first movie in the series to be given a PG-13 rating, which was a fairly new rating at that time, as the previous two movies were rated R. This to me makes it feel like a kind of watered down Mad Max movie. It doesn't feel brutal or sadistic like the first two movies. Personally, I kind of like the shocking violent realities of the first two films, and it kind of reinforces that this is a harsh and dangerous world. It could be because having a PG-13 rating would be more commercial, but I think it's more because this time George Miller wanted to tell an insightful story and to actually see the world of Mad Max. Heck, the movie only has one car chase sequence which is shown at the end of the film, which is something that probably hurt the movie as the first two films were known for their epic car chases and stunts. The only time I feel that the brutal world of the first two movies are recaptured in Thunderdome is in the actual Thunderdome fight scene. But other than that, this Mad Max adventure feels mainly dialogue driven than it does action packed. Growing up, I often found that people would say that this is the boring Mad Max movie, or something along the lines of it's okay, just not as good as the first two. Maybe people just wanted to see more of the carnage and chaos of the first two movies and Thunderdome just didn't quite cut it. Then again, Mad Max Fury Road was also PG-13 and everyone loves that movie, as it was full of action. So maybe if Thunderdome had more action, then it would have been more appreciated over the years. Number 2, planned TV series. After the release of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, George Miller had decided that he wasn't done with Max yet, and was now focusing on a Mad Max TV series. Yep, Mad Max on the small screen. If done right, this could have been epic. George Miller was going to produce as well as direct a few episodes, and Warner Brothers Television was going to distribute the series, which would have seen 26 episodes, and Australian actor John Blake was cast as Max. However, the series collapsed when Blake suffered a serious head injury due to an auto road accident, leaving him paralysed and unable to speak, so the project was scrapped. Then later in 1998, there was talks once again for a Mad Max series, with the studio wanting Bruce Campbell in the role of Max. But that also didn't happen. This was the start of a long journey of scripts and failed attempts and on-again, off-again productions that would lead to Fury Road. But that's a story for another video. Number 1, released to the max. Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome was released in July 1985 and made $36 million on a $10 million budget, giving it a moderate success. The film got mainly positive reviews from critics, although many critics agreed that the movie's strongest parts was at the start of the movie in Bartertown, and that the movie declines in its second half when the tribe of children are introduced, likening the idea to the Lost Boys from Peter Pan. Many felt that this made the movie lose its momentum. The Washington Post called Beyond Thunderdome, quote, boring to the max. However, fans of the previous movies felt let down by Beyond Thunderdome. They felt like it was too safe and lighter in tone and too Hollywoodized, with the series losing its brutal grit of the first two movies as mentioned. I think Beyond Thunderdome was trying to be more of a thinker's Mad Max movie, one that was less about action and more about philosophies of survival, prophecy, and salvation. I think that this Max was less shocking and spectacular and more psychological, which I can understand fans of the first two movies not really liking. But it's a movie that I've come to appreciate in time. Not too long ago, I had a movie night where I saw Mad Max 2 and Beyond Thunderdome back to back. And Mad Max 2 felt like an exciting big explosion, whereas Beyond Thunderdome felt more like the wake that occurred after the explosion. The best way to watch the movie is to not have the other Mad Max movies in mind and to see it as its own thing. To see it more as a story than a spectacle. Maybe Beyond Thunderdome isn't as proactive because George Miller couldn't give as much of himself into the movie this time as he was grieving over the loss of his friend. So for all we know, the death of Brian Kennedy doomed the movie. And if that's so, then that makes Beyond Thunderdome an unfortunate movie. Maybe Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome wasn't ready to be made. Maybe more time needed to be passed before it went back into production after the tragic events. But regardless, I'm glad that it was made. I'm glad that we did end up getting an insightful Mad Max movie that makes us think. I think that Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome has become appreciated more and more in time, with people comparing it to the first two movies less and less and seeing it as its own thing. I don't think it's as strong as the first two movies, but it does continue the story of Max and progress the character. And it still is a worthy and insightful installment in the series. I say check it out, but do so as its own film. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm off to YouTube Dome, where 2 content creators enter and 1 creator leaves. See ya!